$847,000. This is the exact amount my sister stole from me. She didn't borrow it or forget to mention it. She stole it, and she did it 3 days before our father died, with our father's own signature, or a signature that resembled his. When lung cancer finally killed him at the age of 71, he was barely able to hold a pen, let alone rewrite his will. I learned this 3 days ago, not from him or from a letter. I learned it during a phone call when the judge read the words last will and testament, and I couldn't stand up because it wasn't just that, it was something no one would want to live with. The house where we grew up, where my father taught me to ride a bike on the driveway, where my mother planted roses before she passed away. It went to Sienna. Everything. The savings account he promised to split in half, hers. The small investment portfolio he built up over 40 years as a high school math teacher, hers too. I took a single photo album and my mother's wedding ring. Your Honor, my lawyer said in a tense voice, we are requesting. But the judge had already moved on to the next case. My sister Sienna was sitting 3 rows behind me. I didn't turn around. There was no need. I could feel her there. My hands were shaking as I gathered my papers. My vision blurred, and I pressed my palms against the table to keep from falling. Inside, I thought, this can't be real. This can't be real. Then, Sienna said from behind me, it's only the beginning. 6 weeks ago. The call came on Tuesday at 4:47 a.m. I knew before I answered. You always know, don't you? When the phone rings in the dark and your heart stops before your brain can catch up. Maya. Cool. Sienna's voice was flat. She's dead. I sat up in bed. When? An hour ago. The nursing home called first. I'm at home now. She was at home now. She didn't say hurry over, I need you. Just a notification. Calm down. As if she were reporting the weather. I'll be there in 20 minutes, I said. He hung up without saying goodbye. My hands on the steering wheel, I drove through empty streets. The sky was still dark. Dawn had not yet broken. I didn't cry. I couldn't cry. My throat felt like it was filled with sand. My father had been sick for 11 months. 11 months of chemotherapy, radiation, false hopes. For 11 months, I watched a strong man who used to chop wood in the backyard and build bookshelves from scratch become so weak I didn't recognize him. But he remained himself until the end. Sharp-witted, funny, extremely stubborn. 3 days before he died, I sat with him in his bedroom. A hospital bed had been set up by the window so he could see the garden. He asked me to read him an old book of Frost's poems. When I finished, he whispered, "The road not taken." His voice was as thin as paper. "That's it." "I know, Dad." He reached out his hand over the blanket to mine. His skin was cold and paper thin, but he held my hand tightly. "Take care of yourself, Maya Bean. Did you hear me?" I nodded. "And don't let anyone push you around, not even your family." I thought he was just being a father. Protective. Wise. I didn't know he was warning me, as if he had sensed something. When I arrived, Sienna's car was already parked in the driveway. A sleek silver sedan, parked where my dad's old pickup used to be, in my dad's parking spot. I parked behind it and turned off the engine. For a moment, I just sat there, watching the house. Even though everything was familiar, it felt strange. The porch light was on. The windows glowed with a warm, yellow light. It looked the same as always. White wood siding, dark green shutters, the oak tree in the front yard that my father had planted when Sienna was born. Maybe it was the feeling of fatherlessness. Nothing would ever be the same again. I got out of the car. The air was cold and sharp, November biting at my cheeks. A dog barked somewhere down the street. I slowly climbed the porch steps. The front door wasn't locked. I opened it. First, the smell hit me. It wasn't the smell of death. My father had died in a nursing home downtown. But the smell of the absence of life. The house felt emptied out. Empty. Well, as if someone had come in and ripped the soul out of it. Sienna was standing in the living room with her back to me. She was wearing black pants and a charcoal-colored sweater, looking at the framed photos my father had kept on the mantelpiece for decades. The nursing home nurse said he died peacefully, she said without turning around. He passed away in his sleep. I went inside and closed the door. I should have been there. You couldn't have known, he said coldly. He still hadn't looked at me. I walked over to the couch and sat down slowly. The cushions groaned under my weight. This couch. God, this couch. My dad had bought it 20 years ago from a furniture store that had closed down. My mom hated it. "It's ugly, Jim," she would say. But my dad loved it because it was comfortable, and that was all that mattered to him. Sienna finally turned around. Her face was calm. There were no tears. The skin around her eyes wasn't red. She looked like she was attending a business meeting instead of mourning our father. My mind wasn't in the right place at that moment, so I didn't think anything about Sienna. "We need to talk about the arrangements," she said. "Now?" "When else? The funeral home wants to know by this afternoon." I looked at him. Sienna died 2 hours ago, and decisions must be made. A cold thing ran down my spine. This wasn't grief. This was something else. What was she hiding? What was the rush? The funeral was held 4 days later. It was a small funeral, as my father had wanted. Only family and a few old colleagues from high school were there. The service was held at St. Mark's Church, where my father and mother had been married 43 years earlier. I gave the eulogy. Sienna didn't offer, and I didn't ask her to. I talked about how my father loved corny jokes, sang terribly, woke up at 5 a.m. every Saturday morning to make wild blueberry pancakes. I talked about how he taught me that politeness is not weakness, and that standing up for what is right is more important than being liked. My father was a very good man. My voice broke twice. I didn't care. Sienna sat in the front row, completely still. She wore a black dress with a high collar and pearls around her neck. Her husband Derek sat beside her, his hand on his knee. He looked uncomfortable, as if he wished he were somewhere else. After the ceremony, people hugged me and offered their condolences. "He was so proud of you," they said. "He was a very good man." I nodded and smiled bitterly, thanking them until my face ached. Sienna stood by the door, shaking hands like a politician. Elegant, polite. When old Mr. Hendricks from my father's poker group pulled her in for a hug, she patted him on the back 3 times and walked away. We didn't speak to each other, not even once. 2 weeks after the funeral, "We need to discuss the inheritance." Sienna's message came while I was organizing papers at the kitchen table. Marcus was at work, and the house was quiet, except for the hum of the refrigerator. I looked at the message. My stomach clenched. Why is she talking like a lawyer? I replied, "Okay." "When?" The reply came immediately. "Tomorrow. 2:00 p.m. at my father's house. Don't bring anything." Don't bring anything? What did that mean? I couldn't sleep that night. I lay in bed next to my wife, listening to Marcus breathe, staring at the ceiling. Outside, the wind rattled the windows. My father's will had always been simple. Years ago, after my mother died, he had told us both, "When I die, you will split everything evenly. The house, the savings, everything. Equal, fair. Your mother would have wanted it that way." We both nodded. It made sense. It was right. So why did Sienna's message feel like a trap? The next day, I went to my father's house alone. Marcus wanted to come too, but I said no. This was between Sienna and me. It was a gray afternoon, the sky covered with clouds, as if it were about to rain. The neighborhood looked tired, bare trees, brown grass, pumpkin lanterns rotting on porches 2 weeks after Halloween. Sienna's car was already there. There was another car I didn't recognize, a black Mercedes with tinted windows. I parked on the street and walked along the driveway. My heart was pounding. Despite the cold air, my palms were sweaty. The front door opened before I could knock. "Come in," said Sienna. She stepped aside without smiling. I went inside. The smell of the house was different now. Stale, dull, as if no one had opened a window in weeks. A man was sitting at the dining table. He was in his 50s, with salt and pepper hair, wearing an expensive suit. He stood up when I entered and extended his hand. "Ms. Reeves? I'm Richard Calhoun. I represent Ms. Sienna Hart regarding matters related to your father's estate." I automatically shook his hand. It was a firm, professional handshake. Representing. I looked at Sienna. "Why do you need a lawyer?" She didn't answer. She just pointed to the chair across from Richard. "Please sit down." I sat down. My mouth was dry. Richard opened a leather briefcase and took out a document. He slid it across the table toward me. "This is your father's last will and testament," he said. "Revised on November 14th and notarized. November 14th, that 3 days before my father's death." My vision went dark. This can't be possible." "I assure you, it's valid," Richard said. His voice was calm. He was used to this. "Your father was of sound mind when he made these changes." I took the document with trembling hands. The paper was very smooth, very clean. I scanned the text, but the words were blurring together. Then I saw it. "I, James Arthur Reeves, being of sound mind and body, bequeath all my property, including but not limited to my primary residence at 412 Elm Street, all my financial accounts, and my personal possessions to my daughter. See, no, no." My voice sounded very distant. "No, she wouldn't," she promised. "I'm sorry," Richard said, but his voice didn't sound sorry at all. He sounded bored. I looked at Sienna. She sat motionless, her hands clasped in her lap. Her face showed no expression. It was unreadable. "Sienna, my voice broke. "What did you do?" She didn't move. "I didn't do anything, Maya. My father made his own decision." "Nonsense." My words came out harshly, loudly. Richard shifted uncomfortably. He was dying. He was struggling to breathe, let alone sign legal document. "The notary certified his capacity," Richard said. "Everything was done according to the rules." "I don't care." I slammed my hand on the table. The sound echoed in the empty house. "This isn't real. It's a lie." Sienna finally shifted. She leaned forward slightly and looked into my eyes. "The will was submitted to the county. It's legal and binding. The house is mine. The accounts are mine. You can contest it if you want." Well, she paused for a moment. "But you'll lose." I felt as if someone were standing on my chest. I couldn't breathe. I couldn't think. "Why?" The word came out as a whisper. "Why did you do this?" For the first time, something appeared on his face. It wasn't guilt. It wasn't regret. Satisfaction. "Because I could," he said. "I don't remember leaving the house. One moment, I was sitting at the table, staring at Sienna's cold, flawless face. The next moment, I was in my car, gripping the steering wheel so tightly, my knuckles had turned white. I didn't cry. Not yet. I drove home through the fog. When I arrived, Marcus was preparing dinner in the kitchen. He glanced at my face and dropped the knife he was holding. Maya, honey, what happened? I told him everything. The will. Sienna. The lawyer. Duh. The moment he sat there like a statue and told me I couldn't have anything. Marcus took me in his arms. As he stroked my hair, I stood there stiff and numb. We'll fight this, he said. We'll hire a lawyer. He already has a lawyer, a good one. Then we'll find a better one. But I could hear it in his voice. The doubt. The worry. We couldn't afford a legal battle. We were teachers. We lived on our salaries. Sienna, on the other hand, was a real estate agent who drove a Mercedes and wore designer clothes. And she had probably been planning this for months, maybe even for years. 4 weeks later. Still, I hired a lawyer. His name was Tom Bradshaw, and he worked in a tiny office above a restaurant in the city center. He wasn't expensive because he wasn't good. He just didn't have the elegance of someone like Richard Calhoun. But he listened to me. I sat across from his cluttered desk and told him everything. My father's words, Sienna's coldness, the illogical will. Tom leaned back in his chair and tapped his pen against his chin. Here's the situation, he said. If the will is valid, meaning it was properly executed in the presence of witnesses and notarized, there's not much we can do. Of course, otherwise what? If we can prove your father wasn't of sound mind when he signed it, or that someone coerced him. My heart raced. My father was in the final stages of cancer. He was on morphine. That's a start, but we'll need medical records, statements from his doctors, evidence proving he wasn't in a state to make that decision. I can get them. Tom shook his head slowly. Then we'll file an objection. It goes to probate court. It could take months, maybe even longer. I don't care how long it takes. After studying me for a moment, he sighed. All right, let's do it. I spent the next 3 weeks gathering evidence. I called my father's oncologist. I obtained copies of his nursing home records. I found the nurses who were with him in his final days. The picture that emerged was clear. My father was barely conscious in his final days. His morphine dosage had been increased to manage his pain. He slept 18 hours a day. He couldn't feed himself. It was impossible for him to be of sound mind enough to rewrite his will. So, how had Sienna managed to do this? I went to the notary's office mentioned in the will. It was a small shop, squeezed between a nail salon and a pawn shop in a shopping center. The notary was a woman in her 60s wearing reading glasses on a chain around her neck. She looked up when I entered. Can I help you? I placed the will on the counter. You certified this document. She squinted, then shook her head. It looks like my seal. Do you remember the man who signed it? James Reeves? He frowned. Sweetheart, I notarize dozens of documents every day. I can't remember every single one. He was 71 years old. He was dying of cancer. He looked very ill. Furrowing his brow further, he pulled out a ledger and flipped through the pages. Here, November 14th, James Reeves. He pointed to the page. He came with his daughter. My daughter helped him up the stairs. He signed the document. I verified his identity, that's all. Did he seem confused? Like he'd lost his way? The woman hesitated. He looked tired, but he was coherent. He knew what he was doing. Liar. But I couldn't prove it. Not yet. The court date was set for early February. Tom filed our objection, and Richard Calhoun filed a motion to dismiss the case. We went back and forth for weeks, paperwork, depositions, endless legal arguments that made my head spin. Sienna and I didn't talk. Not once. I saw her twice, once during a deposition, once in the hallway outside the courtroom, and both times she looked at me as if I were made of glass and walked right past me. Marcus kept me going. He made sure I ate when I forgot. He hugged me when I cried. He said we would get through this, but I could see his tension, the mounting bills, the way he checked our bank account every morning with a tight jaw. Still, I kept searching. 2 weeks before the court date, I went back to my father's house. Sienna hadn't moved in yet. She was waiting for the estate to be settled. But she had been there. I could tell. Things had been rearranged. The photos above the fireplace were gone. The sofa was covered with a sheet. I had a key my father had given me years ago. I entered through the back door. The house was cold and dark. I turned on the lights and stood in the kitchen, breathing in the stale air. Where could he have hidden it? Because I knew there had to be something. There had to be evidence proving the will was fake. Sienna was smart, but she wasn't perfect. I started in my father's bedroom. I searched his dresser, his closet, the boxes under his bed. There was nothing. Living room, dining room, basement, pite. Nothing. I was about to give up when I saw it. My father's desk in the corner of the study. The old oak desk that had been there since I was a child. I opened each drawer one by one. Bills, receipts, old birthday cards. Then, in the bottom drawer, under a pile of bank statements, I found it. A copy of the original will, drawn up 5 years ago, notarized and signed. Everything was divided equally, just as my father had promised. My hands were shaking as I held it. This was it. Proof that the revised will was nonsense. But that wasn't enough. I needed more. I kept searching. And then I found a letter at the back of the desk drawer. It was addressed to me, in my father's handwriting. Maya Bean, if you're reading this, something has gone wrong. Sienna came to see me today. She asked me to change my will. She said she needed the money more than you did. Derek lost his job and has debts. Maya cried. I had never seen her cry like that before. I said no. I told her it wouldn't be fair to you. But she insisted. She said you would understand. She said family protects family. I'm writing this in case she doesn't give up. In case she tries something. I don't want to believe she would do such a thing, but I want you to know that I haven't changed my mind. The house is as much hers as it is yours. Always. I love you, son. Your father. The letter was dated November 10th, 4 days before the revised will was signed. I collapsed into my father's chair, the letter trembling in my hands. The room was spinning around me. That letter was fake. It had forged my father's signature, and I could prove it. But then the door behind me opened. I turned quickly. Sienna was standing in the doorway, her hand on her stomach, and I saw it for the first time. A small, clearly visible baby bump. We need to talk, she said. Sienna stood in the doorway, her hand resting on that small bulge, and for 3 whole seconds I couldn't move. I couldn't speak. All I could do was stare at the proof of the new life growing inside my sister, the girl who had ruined my life. My father's letter was still in my hand. I gripped it tighter, the paper crumpled between my fingers. How long have you been standing there? My voice was flat, cold. Long enough. He entered the room and closed the door behind him with a soft click. You shouldn't be here, Maya. This is private property now. Private property. I stood up and slipped the letter into my coat pocket. You probably meant stolen property. He didn't flinch. He just walked into the room, his gaze drifting to the open desk drawers, the scattered papers. When his eyes landed on where I was sitting, something flashed across his face. You found the letter. It wasn't a question. Yes, I found it. I took a step toward him. My hands were shaking, but this time it wasn't from shock. It was anger, a pure, white heat of rage that spread like fire from my chest throughout my entire body. My father wrote it 4 days before you forged his signature. 4 days before you convinced a notary to lie for you. 4 days before you stole everything from me. Sienna now placed both hands on her stomach, a gesture so deliberate it made my hair stand on end. A universal symbol of vulnerability, a symbol of protection. I didn't forge anything, she said quietly. And I didn't steal. My father changed his mind. Nonsense. The word exploded inside me. He wrote this letter because he knew you would do something, because he knew how desperate you were. I'm helpless, Maya. His voice cracked slightly. Enough. Derek lost his job 8 months ago. We're drowning in debt. The bank is threatening to foreclose on our house. And now, he looked at his stomach. Now a baby is coming. I needed my father's help, but he refused. Yes, I pushed him. I begged him. But in the end, he was the one who agreed. I looked at her. She was so good. God, she was so good. The tremor in her voice, the tears welling up in her eyes. If I didn't know better, if I hadn't read my father's letter, I might have believed her. You're lying. I'm not lying. Then why did my father write that letter? I pulled the letter out of my pocket and held it up. Why did he say he said no to you? Why did he warn me about you? Sienna's jaw tightened. For a moment, her mask slipped, and I saw what lay beneath. Calculation. He was confused, she said. Morphine? Morphine that made it impossible for him to sign a legal document? I took another step forward. There were only a few steps between us now. We were close enough to smell her perfume. Floral and expensive. You forged his signature, Sienna, and I'll prove it. She laughed. She really laughed. A short, bitter sound that made my stomach churn. With what? A letter proving my father was paranoid in his final days? The original will is with me. The will he signed. The will that divides everything equally. I have a revised will, too. Notarized. Legally binding. She lowered her head, studying me as if I were a stupid child. Do you think the judge will side with you because of a letter? Maya, you're smarter than that. At least, I thought you were. My hands clenched into fists. Every muscle in my body was screaming at me to do something, to push him away, to scream, to make him feel even a fraction of the pain he had caused. But I didn't, because he wanted me to lose control. He wanted me to be the crazy sister who couldn't accept my father's last wish, the suffering girl. I wouldn't give him that. We'll see what the judge has to say, I said quietly. I walked past him toward the door. He didn't try to stop me. He just placed his hands on his stomach and watched me go. When I reached the door, I looked back. Is this real? I asked. The pregnancy. Or is this another lie? The expression on his face didn't change. It's real. Then I feel sorry for that child, growing up with a mother like you. Before he could answer, I left. I walked through the house that should have been half mine, out the back door, across the yard, and to my car. My hands were shaking so much that I struggled to put the key in the ignition. And finally, I let myself go and started crying, sobbing. God, I'm really terrible. I called Tom from the car. He was there, I said, without saying hello. At home. He knows I found the letter. There was a silence. I heard the rustling of papers on his end. Did he say anything accusatory? He admitted that my father said no at first. He said he pressured him to change his mind, but he's sticking to his story, that he eventually agreed. I pressed my palm to my forehead. My head was throbbing. Tom, she's pregnant. He kept touching her belly as if she were a vulnerable victim. Damn it. Yes. There was a moment of silence. Then, okay, here's what we'll do. We'll verify the authenticity of the letter, make sure it's really your father's handwriting. We'll get his medical records to prove he wasn't of sound mind, and we'll get help from a forensic document examiner to review the revised will. What? What? Someone who analyzes signatures. If Sienna forged your father's signature, a good expert can prove it. The problem is, what? They're expensive. It'll cost at least a few $1,000s. I closed my eyes. Marcus and I had maybe $800 saved up. That was all we had. I'll find the money, I said. Maya, I'll find it. I took extra shifts. The next week I worked like crazy. I tutored after school. I graded homework until midnight. I even gave SAT prep lessons on weekends to rich kids whose parents paid $200 an hour. Marcus didn't complain, but I saw worry in his eyes. He watched me from across the room as if afraid I would break. Maybe I was breaking, but I didn't have time to stop and check. By the weekend, I had saved $2,300. Tom introduced me to Dr. Patricia Lim, a forensic document examiner. She worked in a small office in the city, its walls covered with framed certificates and court testimonials. In her 50s, with short gray hair and a sharp, appraising gaze, she made you feel like she could read your secrets just by looking at you. I gave her 2 wills, the original and the revised one, and other samples of my father's handwriting. Birthday cards, shopping lists, a letter he wrote to me. Dr. Lim put on a magnifying glass and leaned over the documents. He didn't speak. He just examined every curve, every stroke, every microscopic detail. I sat across from him, my knees trembling with tension. The office smelled of paper and coffee. The clock on the wall ticked loudly. Finally, after what felt like hours had passed, he lifted his head. The signature on the revised will is forged, he said. My heart stopped. Are you sure? Absolutely. He pointed to the signature with his pen. Do you see the pressure marks here? And the way the Reeves connects to the E? Your father's natural signature shows consistent pressure and a smooth connection. This one, he pointed to the revised will, shows hesitation marks, shaky lines. Can you testify to this in court? Absolutely. I've testified in over 200 cases. He took off his glasses and looked at me. This is clearly forgery, Ms. Reeves, and the person who did it made mistakes. I felt like I'd been holding my breath for weeks, and finally I could exhale. Thank you, I whispered. Thank you very much. He nodded. There's one more thing, this notary stamp. He pointed to the seal on the revised will. The notary said my father seemed tired, but of sound mind. Dr. Lim's mouth tightened into a thin line. According to the medical records you showed me, it was impossible for your father to speak coherently on November 14th. That means either the notary lied or was misled. How can we prove that? Ask your lawyer that question. Tom was very pleased when I told him this. That's it, he said, pacing around his small office. That's exactly what we need. A forensic expert with a solid background. The judge will have to listen. What about the notary? We'll call him to court. We'll make him testify under oath. If he lies, it's perjury. If he tells the truth, The entire will becomes invalid. What if he says he doesn't remember? Then we'll question his credibility. We'll show that he didn't exercise due diligence, that he notarized the document without properly verifying the mental state of a dying man. He stopped walking and looked at me. Maya, we have a real chance now. A good chance. For the first time in weeks, I felt something like hope. The court date was in 2 weeks. I tried to focus on work, on Marcus, on everything except the constant cycle of anxiety in my mind. But it was impossible. Every night, I imagined that courtroom. I imagined the judge reading the verdict. Sometimes we won. Sometimes we lost. I woke up in a cold sweat, my heart racing, not knowing which nightmare was worse. Marcus supported me throughout the entire process. He didn't say much. He understood I didn't need words anymore, but his presence was enough. He was like a sturdy anchor in the storm. Meanwhile, Sienna was everywhere. I would see her car parked in front of my father's house as I drove by. I would see her at the supermarket, hand on her belly, pushing her shopping cart around. Once, she was laughing with Derek over wine at a restaurant downtown. Wine, while I sat in my car across the street, watching them like a stalker. She didn't look pregnant at all. That's what bothered me. Her belly was small. It was too small for someone 4 or 5 months pregnant. What if she was faking it? That thought had taken root in my mind and wouldn't let go. 9 days before the court date, Derek came to my house. It was Saturday morning. Marcus was at the gym. I was drinking coffee in the kitchen when the doorbell rang. I opened the door, and there stood Derek Hart. He was 1.8 meters tall, with sparse brown hair, an ordinary, forgettable face you wouldn't look at twice on the street. He looked terrible. His eyes were bloodshot. His clothes were wrinkled. There was a faint smell of alcohol. Maya, he said, can we talk? I should have slammed the door in his face. I should have told him to get off my property. But an expression on his face stopped me. Despair. What do you want? I asked. 5 minutes, please. I hesitated, then stepped aside. He entered slowly, as if entering enemy territory. We stopped in the entrance hall. I didn't offer him a seat. I didn't offer him anything. Speak, I said. He ran his hand through his hair. He looked at the floor. He looked at the wall. He didn't look at me. I didn't know, he said finally. About the will, about what Sienna did. She told me my father changed the will of his own accord. She said he wanted to leave everything to her because of the baby. And you believed him? I had no reason not to. He looked into my eyes. But then I found something. Last week, in his office at home, my heart began to race. What? He reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a folded piece of paper. He handed it to me. I unfolded the paper. It was a receipt from a medical supply company, dated 3 months ago. Pregnancy, prosthesis, silicone, $249.99. The room began to sway. She's not pregnant, Derek whispered. She's never been pregnant. It's all fake. I looked at the invoice. My hands were numb. Why are you telling me this? Because it's wrong. His voice broke. I thought our debt was because of my job, but it's not. Sienna spent money we didn't have, I don't know what on, clothes, dinners out, things we didn't need, and when I confronted her about the receipts, she told me to mind my own business. So you're scared? Yes, I'm scared. She looked at me, and I saw real fear in her eye. But I'm tired of lying. Your father was a good man. He didn't deserve what you did to him. You don't deserve it either. I folded the receipt and put it in my pocket. Will you testify? He hesitated. Then he nodded. Yes, I'll testify. I called Tom immediately. We've got him, I said. Derek brought me evidence proving Sienna's pregnancy is fake, and he's ready to testify. Tom whistled softly. God, okay, this changes everything. I'll file an urgent petition to add the receipt as evidence, and I'll prepare Derek for his testimony. He'll go after Derek, Tom. He'll destroy him. Let him try. If he does, it will make him look even worse. The next 5 days were a blur. Tom worked day and night to prepare our case. Dr. Lim completed his report. Derek gave his sworn testimony. I also gave a 3-hour testimony, answering every question Tom's assistant asked me. Sienna's lawyer, Richard Calhoun, filed motions to block the receipt, block Derek's testimony, and block Dr. Lim from taking the witness stand. Tom opposed each one. The judge denied most of them. The case was moving forward. I barely slept. I barely ate. Marcus forced me to eat toast and soup as if I were a child. You'll win, he kept repeating. You have the evidence. You know the truth. But I knew it was wrong to trust that the truth mattered in court. The night before the trial, I went to my father's house one last time. I don't know why. Maybe I needed to feel close to him. Maybe I needed to remind myself what I was fighting for. I entered through the back door and wandered through the dark, empty rooms. The house was now like a museum. Cold, lifeless. Finally, I reached my father's bedroom. There was no hospital bed, but the imprint of where it had been was still visible on the carpet. I sat down on the floor and pressed my hand against that spot. I'm doing this for you, I whispered. For us, for everything he tried to take from us. The house didn't respond, but I still felt it. My father's presence, his strength. Don't let anyone push you around. Not even your family. I stood up. I wiped my eyes. I walked out of that house with my head held high. Tomorrow, I would face Sienna in court. And tomorrow, one of us would lose everything. On the day of the hearing, I woke up at 5:30 a.m. Marcus was already awake and making coffee in the kitchen. Without saying a word, he handed me a cup and kissed my forehead to cheer me up. Are you ready? He asked. I thought about the letter, the receipt, Dr. Lim's report, Derek's statement. Yes, I said. I'm ready. We set off silently toward the courthouse. The sun was just beginning to rise, painting the sky pink and gold. It was a beautiful morning. I took it as a good sign. Tom was waiting for us on the steps of the courthouse. He looked smart in his pressed suit, a briefcase in one hand. Is everything ready? He asked. Everything is ready. We went inside together. The courtroom was small and sterile, with fluorescent lights buzzing overhead. The judge's bench rose at the front. Rows of wooden chairs stretched behind the plaintiff and defendant tables. Sienna had already arrived. She was sitting at the defendant's table with Richard Calhoun, wearing a navy dress and a cream-colored cardigan. Her hair was neatly pulled back into a bun. Her makeup was flawless. And yes, she was wearing a fake pregnancy belly. When I entered, she lifted her head. Our eyes met across the room. She didn't look away. She didn't flinch. She just smiled. With a small, cold smile. You can't touch me. I smiled too, because I knew something he didn't. Derek was in the hallway, ready to testify. And by the end of the day, everyone in this courtroom would know exactly what kind of person Sienna really was. The bailiff called out, "All rise. The Honorable Judge Patricia Moreno is presiding over the hearing." The judge entered the courtroom. She was a woman in her 60s, with silver hair and piercing eyes. She sat down. We sat down, and the hearing began. Judge Moreno adjusted her reading glasses and examined the documents spread out before her. The courtroom was silent, except for the hum of the air conditioner and the faint rustling of paper. "This is a petition to contest the will of the late James Arthur Reeves," she said. Her voice was clear and authoritative. "Mrs. Reeves, you are the petitioner. Mrs. Hart, you are the respondent. Both parties are represented by their attorneys. Are we ready to proceed?" "Yes, Your Honor," said Tom, standing up. "We are ready, Your Honor," Richard Calhoun added. The judge nodded. "Mr. Bradshaw, you may proceed with your opening statement." Tom stood up and walked to the center of the room. He looked small in that large space, but his voice was steady. "Your Honor, this case concerns theft in the guise of inheritance. James Reeves was a good man who made a promise to both his daughters. When he died, they would share his estate equally. This promise was documented in a will signed 5 years ago. This will..." Tom pointed to our table. "However, 3 days before Mr. Reeves' death, while he was under heavy medication and nearly unconscious, a mysterious new will mysteriously appeared. This will left the house, the savings, everything to one daughter, Sienna Hart." I watched the judge's face. He gave nothing away. "The evidence will show that this revised will is a forgery," Tom continued. "Miss Hart manipulated the signature of a dying man for her own financial gain. She deceived the notary, and she fabricated her pregnancy to gain sympathy and avoid scrutiny." He paused for a moment, waiting for his words to sink in. "This isn't about a father changing his mind. This is about fraud, and we intend to prove it." He sat down. Richard Calhoun slowly stood up. He was taller than Tom, better dressed, and moved with the confidence of someone who had won hundreds of cases just like this one. "Your Honor," he said, his voice as soft as silk, "my client loved his father very much. When his father fell ill, he took care of him. He visited him every day. He held his hand. He read to him. He did everything he could to make his final months as comfortable." He turned slightly, gesturing toward Sienna. "And when Mr. Reeves realized his time was up, he made a difficult decision. He chose to leave his estate to the daughter who needed it most." Sienna wiped her eyes with a handkerchief. "The performance was flawless." "Mrs. Hart is pregnant," Richard continued. "She and her husband are experiencing financial hardship. Mr. Reeves knew this. Out of love and generosity, he changed his will to help them. There was no fraud. There was no deception. There was only a father looking out for his child." He looked at the judge. "The plaintiff's claims are baseless and contemptible. We request that this case be dismissed and that Mr. Reeves' final wish be honored." He sat down. I wanted to throw something at him. I wanted to stand up and shout that it was all a lie. But I sat still, clasped my hands in my lap, and carefully kept my face neutral. The trial had begun. Judge Moreno called the first witness. "Dr. Patricia Lim, please come to the witness stand." Dr. Lim walked to the witness stand with the same calm and appraising expression she had in her office. She took the oath and sat down with perfect posture. Tom approached. "Dr. Lim, could you state your credentials to the court?" "I hold a doctorate in forensic document examination from Georgetown University. I have been working in this field for 23 years and have testified as an expert witness in over 200 cases." "What did you examine in this case?" "2 wills attributed to James Reeves. One was written 5 years ago, the other on November 14th of last year. I also examined numerous samples of Mr. Reeves' authenticated handwriting." Tom picked up a document. "This is your report, isn't it?" "Yes." "What were your findings?" Dr. Lim did not hesitate. "The signature on the November 14th will is forged. It was made by someone attempting to imitate Mr. Reeves' signature, but there are several indicators proving it is not genuine. A murmur rippled through the courtroom. Judge Moreno tapped his gavel once. "Explain," said Tom. Dr. Lim pulled out a file and opened the page showing enlarged images of the two signatures side by side. Mr. Reeves's natural signature shows consistent pressure, even strokes, and what we call writing flow, the natural rhythm created by muscle memory. The signature on the revised will, however, shows hesitation marks, irregular pressure, and tremor marks. He pointed with his pen. Here you can see the pen was lifted in the middle of the stroke. And here, the J shows a loop that Mr. Reeves never used in any verified sample. "Is there a chance you're mistaken?" Tom asked. "No, this is clearly forgery." Richard Calhoun stood up for cross-examination. His smile was pleasant, almost friendly. "Dr. Lim, you said Mr. Reeves was ill when he signed his revised will. Is that correct?" "According to the medical records, yes." "Well, could his illness, the medications he was taking, and his fatigue have affected his handwriting? Could they have made his handwriting different from normal?" "It is possible that his illness could have affected his handwriting," Dr. Lim said carefully. "But the inconsistencies I found are not consistent with deterioration. They are consistent with forgery. But you can't be 100% certain, can you? In forensic document examination, we work with probability levels. In this case, the probability that this signature is genuine is less than 1%. Richard raised his eyebrows. "Less than 1%, but not 0. "Correct. Not 0. He smiled as if he'd scored a point. "No further questions." But I could tell from the judge's face. He was listening carefully. He wasn't rejecting Dr. Lim's statement. We had made sure he listened. Tom called me to the witness stand. My legs felt like they were made of wood as I walked to the witness stand. My mouth was dry. My palms were sweating. The bailiff administered the oath. I sat down and looked around the courtroom. Marcus was sitting in the front row, a reassuring expression on his face. Sienna was at the defendant's table, watching me with her cold, dark eyes. Tom began gently. "Miss Reeves, can you tell the court about your relationship with your father?" "We were close," I said. My voice came out stronger than I expected. "He was my best friend. We talked every week. After my mother died 10 years ago, we grew even closer." "Did he ever mention his will to you?" "Yes, many times. He said that when he died, everything would be divided equally between Sienna and me. He said it was fair, that my mother would have wanted it that way." "Did he ever mention wanting to change that arrangement?" "Never." Tom showed me my father's letter. "Do you recognize this?" My throat tightened. "This is a letter my father wrote to me. I found it on his desk after he died." "Can you read the highlighted part?" With trembling hands, I took the letter. "I'm writing this in case he doesn't give up. In case he tries to do something. I don't want to believe he would do such a thing. But I want you to know that I haven't changed my mind. The house is as much yours as it is his. Always." I lifted my head. A few people in the gallery had leaned forward. "When was this letter written?" Tom asked. "November 10th, 4 days before the revised will was allegedly signed." No further questions. Richard Calhoun stood up for a cross-examination. His smile was gone. He looked at me as if I were a serious rival to be taken seriously. "Mrs. Reeves, you and your sister don't get along, do you?" "We used to be. But not anymore. In fact, you're angry with her, aren't you?" "I'm angry at what she did to our father." "Or maybe you're angry at her because your father chose her over you." His voice had grown sharp. "Maybe you're angry because your father left his inheritance to your sister because she needed it more." "My father didn't give her anything. My sister forged my father's signature. That's what you claim, but this letter, he held the letter up, doesn't prove it's fake. It only proves your father was confused, paranoid, on medication. He wasn't paranoid. He was right. Richard ignored this. You were close to your father too, weren't you? Yes. So close that you visited him every day during his final illness, didn't you? I hesitated. Not every day. I have a job. I have a husband. I visited as often as I could. But your sister visited him every day, didn't she? I clenched my jaw. Yes. She was there more than you were. She valued him more than you did. That's not true. And now you're trying to punish her because she's a better girl. Objection. Tom stood up. Contradictory. Objection granted, said Judge Moreno. Mr. Calhoun rephrased the statement. But the damage was already done. Richard had planted the seeds. I could see it on the judge's face. I have no further questions, said Richard, and sat down. When I stepped down from the witness stand, I felt like I'd been hit by a truck. Then Derek took the stand. He looked even worse than I had seen him at my house. His hands trembled as he swore the oath. His voice cracked as he said his name. Tom approached carefully. Mr. Hart, you are married to Sienna Hart, correct? Yes. How long have you been married? 12 years. Can you tell the court what you discovered 3 weeks ago? Derek swallowed hard. He didn't look at Sienna. I found a bill in my wife's office. It was from a medical supply company for a pregnancy prosthesis. The courtroom stirred. People held their breath. Someone gasped, "Oh my God," loud enough to be heard. Judge Moreno banged his gavel. Silence. Tom showed the bill. Is this the document you found? Yes. What conclusion did you draw from this? That my wife isn't pregnant. She's just acting like she is. Sienna stood up. That's a lie. Ms. Hart, sit down, the judge said sternly. Richard grabbed Sienna's arm and pulled her back into her chair. His face was flushed. The carefully constructed mask was beginning to crack. Tom continued. Did you discuss this with your wife? Yes. She told me to mind my own business. She said that if I told anyone, she would divorce me and take everything I own. Yet here you are today, testifying against him. Why? Derek finally looked at Sienna. Because I'm tired of lying. Because her father didn't deserve what she did. And because I couldn't live with myself if I stayed silent. Richard Calhoun's cross-examination was relentless. He questioned Derek's credibility, his marriage, his work history. He suggested Derek was lying to get revenge on Sienna for leaving him, which wasn't even true. But Derek was resolute. I'm telling the truth, he said quietly. My wife forged that will, and she fabricated the pregnancy to cover it up. Next was the notary. Her name was Linda Chen, and she looked very scared. While Tom was asking her questions, she kept looking at Sienna. Miss Chen, did you notarize the revised will, dated November 14th? Yes. And in your statement, you mentioned that James Reeves spoke tiredly but coherently. As far as I recall, yes. Tom pulled out my father's medical records. According to these records, Mr. Reeves was receiving morphine drops that day. He was sleeping 18 hours a day. His doctors stated that he was incapable of making legal decisions. Tom looked at her. So I ask again, was James Reeves of sound mind when you had the will notarized? Linda's face paled. I don't know. Miss Chen, were you paid to lie? Objection. Richard stood up. Harassment. Overruled. Mr. Bradshaw, watch your tone. But, Tom persisted. Miss Chen, did Sienna Hart give you money before or after having that document notarized? I was given a tip for my services. How much? Linda's voice was almost a whisper. $500. The courtroom erupted again. Judge Moreno banged his gavel. Silence. I will clear this courtroom if necessary. Tom turned to the judge. Your Honor, we have clear evidence of fraud, forgery, and bribery. The revised will is fake, and Sienna Hart planned all of this. Richard Calhoun stood up. Your Honor, this is all speculation, and— Sit down, Mr. Calhoun. The judge's voice was ice cold. He looked at Sienna. Miss Hart, stand up. Sienna slowly stood up. Her hands were clenched into fists. The fake pregnancy belly now looked ridiculous, like a cheap prop in a bad play. Is there anything you wish to say? The judge asked. Sienna remained silent for a long time. She just stood there, her chest rising and falling rapidly. Then she laughed. It wasn't a nervous laugh. It wasn't a guilty laugh either. It was a cold, bitter, angry laugh that made my hair stand on end. Do you want to know the truth? She said. Okay, yes, I forged the will. Yes, I paid the notary. Yes, the pregnancy was fake. His eyes burned as he looked at me. And I'd do it all again, because I earned that money. While you played the perfect daughter from afar, I took care of my father for 12 years. I earned that inheritance. Sienna, shut up, Richard hissed. But she couldn't stop. Oh, the mask had fallen, and everything beneath it was spilling out. Was he going to give you half? You? What did you do for him? You visited on holidays. You called once a week? I was there, every day. I fed him. I bathed him. I watched him die. Her voice broke. Yes, I changed the will, because I deserved it more than you did. Judge Moreno's face was stony. Miss Hart, you just confessed to committing multiple crimes in my courtroom. I rule in favor of the plaintiff. The altered will is declared invalid and void. The original will stands. Furthermore, I'm referring this case to the district attorney for criminal investigation. He banged his gavel. The hearing is adjourned. There I sat, stunned. Everything was over. I had won. Tom was shaking my hand. Marcus was hugging me. People were congratulating me. But I couldn't take my eyes off Sienna. Now she was standing alone at the defendant's table. Richard had already packed his bag and left. Derek had left too. She looked at me from the other end of the room, and for a moment I saw something on her face. It wasn't anger. It wasn't regret. Emptiness. Then she turned and walked out of the courtroom, her fake belly leading the way. And I never saw him again. 3 days later, the police arrested Sienna at her home. She was charged with forgery, fraud, and bribery. The district attorney sought a sentence of 2 to 5 years in prison. Derek filed for divorce that same week. I should have felt like I had won. I should have felt like justice had been served. But instead, I just felt tired. Tired, sad, and empty. On the day the inheritance was officially transferred to me, Marcus and I went to my father's house. We walked through the empty rooms together. The furniture was still there. Sienna had left everything behind when she was arrested, but the house felt different now. Lighter, as if it could finally breathe. I stood in the living room, looking at the mantelpiece where my father's photos used to be. Marcus came up behind me and wrapped his arms around my waist. What are you thinking? He asked. I'm thinking about my father. I'm wondering what he would say if he could see all this. What do you think he would say? I smiled. I told you not to let anyone push you around. Marcus chuckled softly. That's just like him. We stayed there for a while, hugging each other in the quiet house. and then I heard it. The doorbell rang. I left Marcus and went to open the door. A woman was standing on the porch, in her 40s, with blonde hair, a tense smile. She was holding an envelope. "Maya Reeves?" she asked. "Yes. My name is Jennifer Hastings. I'm a lawyer. I represent your father's estate." She handed me the envelope. "Your father left you something even Sienna didn't know about." I took the envelope with trembling hands. Inside was a bank statement, an account I'd never heard of, an account with $450,000. And there was a note written in my father's handwriting. "Maya Bean, if you're reading this, it means you fought for what was right. I'm proud of you. This money is yours. I set it aside years ago just in case. Use it for something good. Build something. Dream big. Live wide. With love, your father." I pressed the note to my chest and began to cry. These tears weren't from sadness. They were tears of gratitude. I stood on the porch of my father's house, now my house, holding the bank statement in my hand, and I felt something change inside my chest. It was as if a door that had been locked for months was finally opening. Marcus read the note over my shoulder. He wrapped his arms around me tighter. "He knew," Marcus whispered. "He knew Sienna would do something, so he protected you." Attorney Jennifer Hastings smiled gently. "Your father opened this account 15 years ago. He made regular deposits. His only instruction was that if there was a dispute over the inheritance, you should receive the money." She paused. "He loved you very much, Maya." My voice was hoarse. "Thank you for bringing this. There's one more thing." She reached into her bag and pulled out another envelope. "He left you a letter. He wrote it 2 years ago and gave it to me to keep. He said you'd know when to read it." I took the envelope with trembling hands. My name was written in my father's familiar handwriting on the front. Jennifer squeezed my shoulder. "Take care of yourself," she said, then left. I didn't open the letter right away. Marcus and I went inside. We sat down on the ugly but comfortable chair my father loved so much. I held the envelope in my lap and just looked at it. "You don't have to read it now," Marcus said quietly. "I know, but I had to read it. I needed to hear my father's voice one more time." I carefully opened the envelope and took out 2 pages of paper written in my father's neat handwriting. "Dear Maya Bean, if you're reading this, something has gone wrong. I hope I'm wrong. I hope Sienna and you are sitting together, reading this and laughing at your paranoid old man. But if that's not the case, if she did what I fear she did, then there are a few things you need to know. First, none of this is your fault. Sienna always fought for justice. Even as a little girl, she needed more. More attention, more praise, more proof that she was loved. Your mother and I tried to give her these things, but it was never enough. Second, you did nothing wrong by living your own life. You didn't abandon me. You called. You visited. You loved me the way healthy girls love their fathers, with independence and respect. Sienna's way of loving was different. It was a consuming love, and I let her because I didn't know how to fix the brokenness inside her. Third, the money I left you is not just money. It is freedom. The freedom to choose your own path. The freedom to build something meaningful. The freedom to live without suffering. Please don't spend it on anger or revenge. Use it to create something beautiful. And finally, I am proud of you. I have always been proud of you. Not because you are perfect, but because you are kind, fair, and strong. You have become exactly the person I hoped you would be when you grew up. No matter what, remember this. Family isn't just about blood. It's about the people who are there for you. The ones who fight for what's right. The ones who love you, even in hard times. You were by my side, Maya. You fought. You loved me deeply. And that's all a father could ever ask for. With all my love, forever. Your father. I read the letter 3 times. By the 3rd time, I wasn't crying anymore. I was smiling. Because my father had given me exactly what I needed. Permission to move forward. Over the next 6 months, I rebuilt my life piece by piece. First, I quit my teaching job. Not because I didn't love teaching, but because I did. But I needed space to breathe, to heal, to figure out what to do next. Marcus fully supported me. Don't rush, he said. We have money now. There's no need to rush. I didn't rush. I started therapy. At first, twice a week, then once a week. I talked about my father. I talked about Sienna. I talked about the betrayal, grief, and complex emotions I still carried inside me. My therapist, Dr. Okafor, was calm and steady. He never told me how I should feel. He just helped me understand what I was feeling. It's normal to be angry, he said during one session. It's also normal to be sad. These feelings can exist at the same time. I don't understand how she could do that, I said. We grew up in the same house. We had the same parents. How did we become so different? Dr. Okafor leaned back in his chair. Because you made different choices. Sienna chose to take. You chose to build. It's not about the circumstances. It's about character. I decided to renovate my father's house. Not to sell it. I couldn't convince myself to do that. But to make it feel like me. A place where new memories could grow alongside the old ones. I hired contractors. We repainted the walls in warm, soft colors. We refinished the hardwood floors. We replaced the old kitchen cabinets with new ones, white and sparkling clean. Marcus helped me plant a garden in the backyard. Roses my mother used to grow. Tomatoes. Herbs. On weekends, we dug the soil together, our hands muddy, our backs warmed by the sun. Slowly, the house began to come back to life. One afternoon, the contractors were removing the old carpet from the upstairs hallway, and one of them called out to me, "Ma'am, you might want to see this." I climbed the stairs. The contractor was kneeling next to a loose floorboard, holding something in his hand. A small wooden box. "I found it under the floor," he said. "It looks like it's been there for a long time." I took the box and opened it. Inside were photographs. Dozens of photographs. Photos of Sienna and me as children. Photos of my mom and dad. Photos I'd never seen before. At the bottom of the box was another note from my father. "Maya, these are my favorite memories. I hid them here to keep them safe. So, no matter what happens, you can find them. Look at these photos and remember, we were once happy. All of us. Let what came after not erase what came before. Love, your father." I sat on the floor of the empty hallway and examined each photo one by one. There was a photo of Sienna and me, maybe 6 and 8 years old, building a snowman in the front yard. Our faces were red from the cold, and we were both laughing. I stared at that photo for a long time. We were once happy. 3 months after the trial, I received a letter from Sienna. The letter came in a plain white envelope with the county jail's address written on it. My first instinct was to throw it away without opening it, but I didn't. I sat down at the kitchen table next to Marcus and opened the letter. The letter was short. It consisted of a few lines written in Sienna's neat handwriting. "Maya, I don't expect you to forgive me. I don't even expect you to read this. But I needed to apologize. I was wrong. About everything. And I will spend the rest of my life regretting what I did to my father, to you, to our family. I hope you're happy. I hope you find peace. I don't deserve your forgiveness, but I still want it. Sienna. I folded the letter and put it back in the envelope. Marcus was watching me closely. What are you thinking? I'm thinking. I paused to find the right words. I think I haven't forgiven him. Not yet. Maybe I never will. But I don't hate him either. I'm just tired of carrying his burden. Marcus took my hand. That's fair. I put the letter back in the drawer and didn't look at it again. Derek came to see me in the spring. I almost didn't let him in, but there was something about the way he stood on the porch, shoulders slumped, hands in his pockets, that made me open the door. I didn't come to defend him, he said immediately. I just wanted to apologize for not noticing what was happening sooner, for not being able to stop it. You stopped it, I said. You witnessed it. Too late, he said. His voice cracked. I should have known. All the signs were there, but I didn't want to see them. I studied him. He looked older than he had 6 months ago. Weaker. Wait. Graya, don't ta. Are you okay? I asked. He laughed bitterly. Not really. The divorce is almost final. I lost my house. I'm living in a crappy apartment in the city center. He paused for a moment. But I'm alive, and I'm not lying anymore. At least that's something. That's something. For a moment, we stood there in an awkward silence. I just wanted to say thank you, Derek said, for giving me the chance to do the right thing, even if I didn't deserve it. Everyone deserves a chance to do the right thing, I said quietly. You took that chance. That's what matters. He nodded, his eyes teary. Then he turned and walked toward his car. I watched him walk away, and a sense of closure washed over me. By summer, I knew what I wanted to do with my father's money. I established a foundation, the James Arthur Reeves Foundation for Equality in Education. Its mission was simple: to provide scholarships to children from low-income families who wanted to become teachers. My father had been a teacher for 40 years. He truly believed that education could change lives. He believed that good teachers could save children struggling with hardship. This felt like the right way to honor him. I worked with a lawyer to establish this nonprofit organization. I assembled a small team. In September, we finally launched by hosting a fundraising event at my father's house. Now my house, which had just finished renovations. Over 100 people came. My father's former students, his colleagues, his friends, people who loved him, missed him, and wanted to celebrate his memory. We raised $85,000 in one night. As the last guests were leaving, Marcus stood with me on the porch and watched the sun set over the neighborhood. Your father would have been so proud, he said. I know, I said. I rested my head on his shoulder. I can feel it. A year after my father's death, I went to his grave. It was a clear, cold, and bright November morning. The cemetery was quiet except for the rustling of the wind through the trees. I had brought flowers, white roses like the ones my mother used to grow. I knelt before the headstone and traced the letters of his name with my fingers. James Arthur Reeves. Dear father, teacher, friend. 1953-2024. Hello, Dad, I said softly. It's been a long time, I know. The wind picked up and scattered the leaves across the grass. I wanted to tell you, I won. I fought for what was right, just like you taught me, and I won. My voice broke. The foundation is doing well. We gave out 5 scholarships this year. Thanks to you, 5 children who couldn't afford to go to college will become teachers. I wiped the tears from my cheeks. Sienna is in prison. I don't know if you'll be sad about that or relieved. Maybe both. I don't hate her anymore, Dad. I left her. I had to leave her for my own peace of mind. A bird was chirping among the trees. I miss you, I whispered. Every day. But I'm okay. More than okay. I'm happy. I'm building something good, something important. I left the roses at his grave and stood up. Thank you, I said, for everything, for loving me, for protecting me, for teaching me to fight. I returned to my car, feeling lighter than I had in months. That evening, Marcus and I sat in our living room. It's no longer my father's house. It's our house, the place where we're building our future. I've been thinking, Marcus said, about what happens next. What do you mean? He smiled. Well, what do you say we start a family? What do you say we bring some life into this house? What do you say we make it loud, messy, and full of children? I looked at him. I really looked at him. At this man who stood by me through everything, who held me when I cried, celebrated with me when I won, and never once asked me to be anyone other than who I am. Yes, I said. Let's do it. He pulled me close and kissed me. And for the first time in a long while, I felt something I had almost forgotten. Hope. Hope. 2 years later, I'm standing in my backyard, watching my daughter Ellie, named after my father's favorite poet, Emily Dickinson, chasing butterflies in the garden. She's 2 years old. She has Marcus's eyes and my stubbornness. Beautiful, mischievous, and perfect. The foundation is growing successfully. We've awarded 23 scholarships so far. Next year, we'll expand to other states. Sienna was released from prison 6 months ago. According to Derek, she's moved to the other side of the country. She's started a new life far away from here. I hope she finds peace. I truly do. But I don't think about her much anymore. Because what I think about now is this: my daughter's smile in the sunshine, my husband grilling hamburgers on the porch, the bright, vibrant roses blooming along the fence, the house that was almost taken from me but has become the foundation of all the beautiful things in my life. Through all of this, I learned something. I learned that betrayal doesn't have to destroy you. I learned that sorrow and joy can coexist. I learned that you can honor the past while building the future. I learned that family isn't just about blood ties. Family is about those who are there for you, those who fight for you, those who love you in tough times. And I learned that justice isn't always loud or dramatic. Sometimes it's quiet, patient, strategic. Sometimes justice is not letting someone else's cruelty define your story. Ellie runs toward me with a dandelion she picked from the grass. For you, Mom, she says, holding it out to me with a toothless smile. I take the flower and crouch down to her level. Thank you, baby. It's beautiful. Like you, she says, wrapping her arms around my neck. I hold her tightly, breathing in the scent of the sun, the grass, and the innocence of childhood. And I think of my father, the letter he wrote to me, the legacy he left behind. Use the money to create something beautiful, he had said. I look at my life, my daughter, my husband, my home, my foundation, and I realize I've done exactly that. If you have been betrayed by someone you love, if you have had to fight for what you deserve, if you have wondered whether justice is real or just a word people use to make themselves feel better, I want you to know this. Justice is real. Justice is real. Healing is possible. And you are stronger than you think. What would you do if someone stole your inheritance? How would you respond? Share your story in the comments. You are not alone, and your voice matters.